Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Okay, good evening to all of you. Today I want to say something about sustainability. Why it is because the course name is sustainable plastic. So there is a word sustainable or sustainability. So we want to understand what it is. Okay, and this is a word that is very commonly used these days. You'll be surprised that in a given day how many times you actually hear this word, especially if you're in the campus. So I want to ask you, what do you think sustainability is? Okay, take a few moments, write whatever comes to your mind about sustainability, write it in your notebook, right? Don't check your phones, don't use internet, just write on your notebook or iPad whatever you feel that is sustainability. So we are asking students to write what they think about sustainability, right? Just write few lines what you think is sustainability. I will not ask you to read, I will not ask you to submit, I will not ask you to show it to your neighbors. It's just for your own reference. So feel free to write whatever you feel like. You not writing? You already wrote. Okay, good. Try to finish the next 20 seconds or so. I don't want you to be writing an essay. So. All right, okay, please stop and attention to the board. So, the good news is there is no definition, okay, there is no definition, but there is a working definition, something that we all commonly agree upon, okay, and what that is. So, in 1987, okay, the United Nations set up a committee and a report was written titled as Our Common Future, right. This is submitted by Gro Brundtland, who was the ex-Prime Minister of Norway several times, I think. And this report is commonly known as the Brundtland report. Okay. So here I am highlighting a particular passage which is often quoted in the literature as the definition of sustainability. Okay. So if you read carefully, it's a very beautifully written statement. It pretty much captures every element of what we perceive sustainability. It says that it is a development. So here in the first slide I had sustainability as a noun. So here I have sustainable as an adjective, okay, but they are interrelated. So here sustainable development for humankind, human civilization, right, as we live is a kind of a development that meets the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. You can see the definition is very general. It does not talk about material, it does not talk about energy, it does not talk about water, it does not talk about environment, right? It is just about needs of this generation and how we satisfy our needs and how the oncoming generation, how they are going to meet their needs. Okay, and we want to ensure that the future also has resources to meet their own needs. Okay, so it's a common definition, working definition if you want to speak. Okay. So if you ask, as you would see in your answer, have any of you gotten something close to this? Because you all know about this report. Good, that's very good. That's very nice that you're already aware of such a report or definition. That's good. So now I want to draw your attention to the one word, the needs. Okay, what is this needs? This needs depend on who you are. People have different kinds of needs, right? So here you could just think about in your statement, in your write-up, you could be an economist thinking about money, wealth, okay, of a nation, of a country, of yourself. That could be a need, it can be a financial need, so that you can do certain things, luxury life, convenient travel, okay, and stuff like that. Okay, you can probably achieve if you have good wealth. Okay, so if you're an economist or a person of that kind, you would think your needs are related to financial health or financial requirements, or you could be an environmentalist. Many of you could be. Okay, that's why you're doing this course, and you would think about needs being having access to clean water, clean air, a good environment to live disease free, something that you can have good time in this earth for your time. Okay, so protection of environment, ecology, other species, the ecosystem, the ecology, those are your expectations and needs. Okay, you could be a humanist, social scientist, where you would say that the needs are about how to share knowledge, culture, values, right? Those are other needs. So when we say needs, we actually encompass the entire domain of all kinds of needs: financial, cultural, and environmental, and etc. etc. Okay, so that's what we say what these needs are. So now if you go back and read again, maybe this definition means more to you now. Okay, and you can also see something personal to you. Okay, so we say that okay, development that meets the needs of a nation, let's say, of today, without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet the same kind of needs. Okay, so that's a kind of overall understanding of what sustainability or sustainable development is, right? You are with me? Is it agreeable? Anyone has a conflict or a different opinion about this? All right, okay, good. Now, so they didn't stop at this point. They went on further to set some targets. Okay, so this picture you would have seen again many times in many places, right? This is called the SDG, right? Sustainable Development Goals, right? And this is actually set for the period 2025 to 2030. We are already in 2025. We have 5 more years to go to actually enable all these goals. Okay, there are 17 goals. If you see, it pretty much covers not only people but also environment, also about other species and the world entirely, right? You see, for example, of course, we don't want any poverty. We want everyone have access to food and live healthy life. Zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy. Okay, of course, energy is something very important. Decent work and economic growth. Okay, we don't want any exploitation. We want a proper working place. And my lab is not one, so it's very crowded. So, and then you have industry, innovation, infrastructure, reduced inequality, and sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production. I think that is what that means. What are we talking about there? Responsible consumption and production. Maybe that is indicating something about energy resources, material resources of the planet. Okay. Then we have climate action. Of course, climate is, everybody understand. Life below water, that is marine, ocean, and life below. Life on land, other species living on land. Peace, justice, strong institutions, democracy, world peace, which is also important, right? And then partnership for the goals. You cannot do all this alone. Okay, you have to establish partnership and simultaneously evolve for a policy towards all this. Okay, it's a very ambitious goal, and I think many nations actually report to what extent they have actually achieved these goals. As a country, we have not done much in this entire space. We have a lot more to do, right? So people like you, that's where you have a role to play. Okay, how do you make sure that we meet our needs of your generation and the next generation by engaging in all these responsibility and sustainable development goals, right? You don't want to feel sad. Okay, so it's a genuine and noble cause, I think, right? That we want to all grow with all this basic normals. Okay, so that's something is all known to you. Now I want to actually break this a little bit down and then try to focus a little bit more. Now when you think about any business or any corporate, more often we think about balance sheet, right? We say, okay, how much liability, assets, expenditure, and then you have one bottom line and say net profit. If it's a positive number, you're making profit. If it's a negative number, you're actually incurring losses. So that's called bottom line. So that's what the bottom line means in the financial world. But bottom line is not only for financial world, it also applies to other kinds. Okay, so that's the concept that we look at this as the triple bottom line, in short 3BL, right? And here when we look at global picture, okay, the larger picture, larger goals of the society, we think of three things. We think about people, right? We think about profit, health, financial aspects, and then we also think about the planet, the people, and the profit. Okay, all three P's. So if you're a corporate, your aim cannot be only to increase your profit. Okay, because when you try to increase, you're gonna affect the planet or you're gonna affect the people. Maybe you're gonna have a very poor working condition, child labor, exploitation. Okay, similarly, when you try to maximize your profit, you may hurt the planet by drawing more resources than what you should, or maybe you're throwing more waste than what you should do. So by maximizing one, you might actually compromise other two. Or you can actually go to planet, you can say, okay, I'm not going to make any changes, I want to live like a Stone Age. Okay, then we have problem with survival. People will get affected, and there is no way of making profit or any resources valuable. So you will end up in a more like a caveman, living very close to nature, just like how our ancestors did. So maximizing just only planet's health is going to affect the other two. Or you can just go and talk about people. Okay, I want everything good for the people. Okay, then again you're going to hurt other two. You have to spend more money and you have to extract a lot of resources to planet. So the point is, you don't want to go to extremes. There seems to be a small region where you can actually achieve all the goals, and this is a sweet spot we want to operate. As an institution, as a corporation, as an individual, this is what you want to operate. You want to make sure you have an sufficient care for the planet, people, and profit. Okay, and this shaded region is what we call the operating domain, where sustainability can be realized. Okay, so here if you want to just decouple this is what it is. So the planet is shown as a tree, and the profit is shown as a industrial complex, and the people is shown as a family here. And you can see that little bit qualification you can make. Okay, so what this planet means, it is basically means a natural capital. Okay, so capital is, if you want to define again what is capital, so capital is something, a finite asset that can be built up, conserved by appropriate husbandry or drawn down and exchanged for other goods and services. Okay, so that's how we say about capital. Okay, humans come and go, they are generated, resources also can be generated, some of them, and so on. Okay, so here if you see the planet means natural capital, which includes clean air, productive land, fresh water, ocean, biosphere, material, energy resources. Okay, that's what we mean by planet. Okay, or natural capital. Then we have this profit or manufactured capital, which refers to the financial health, means that industrial capacity, financial health, GDP, growth, etc., etc. Okay, so that means the manufactured capital. Then we have this human capital or the people, which means human or social capital, which means that knowledge contained in a society, education, culture, values, health, safety, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all that. Okay, so we think of, I'm trying to map the triple bottom line to capitals. Okay, these are basically analogous things. We are mapping each one to each of the capitals. Each bottom line is mapped onto a capital, right? So now I want to break down to each one of them. I'm trying to look at a very, there's a very complicated picture. I'll come to what it is. What we're trying to say is that we are seeing how we are actually using natural capital, how each country is using natural capital, who is drawing more, who is drawing less. Okay, so that we can see who is having larger impact on the planet as a country. Okay, and this plot kind of summarizes that. So now we need some sort of a measure, okay, of how we use natural capital. Okay, so here we define something called ecological footprint per capita. This is not the only definition. There are other things. There's a carbon dioxide footprint, there's an energy footprint, so on. So, okay, but in this example, we have taken the ecological footprint per capita. Per capita means per person in a given country. So you see how the way it is defined is, it is a measure of the biologically productive land, that means it's a fertile land, and marine area, because marine area also we draw resources from, required to produce resources and absorb waste of a human population. So it's not only a source of resources, but also it should be a land of disposal, a place of disposal. How much land I need to do that for one person, right? So here, if you look at this Luxembourg, okay, it's one of the rich nation, very small nation in Europe, and we see that the ecological footprint is actually measured in terms of global hectares per capita. So area we measure in different units: square feet, square meters, acres, hectares, right? So here I have given some comparison. So 1 hectare means about 10,000 square meter, or it also means 2.47 acres. Our IIT campus is about 620 acres. Okay, so that means it's about 251 hectares, the entire campus of IIT Madras. So that's what hectare means. Okay, so here we are giving all the units in terms of the global hectare per capita, per person. So you can see the maximum is something about 12 hectares, right? 12 hectares of land is needed for one person living in Luxembourg to create the kind of resources that you need. That land is not all the land, it is a land of fertility, where things can grow, things can actually be dumped in landfills and other things. Okay, so clearly this country has a very high ecological footprint. That means they are actually using a lot of resources to meet their own needs, whatever that means. And look at this Congo. Okay, so here we have categorized them based on different continents. Okay, so here you can see Congo has very close to zero. It's just about 0.1 or 0.2 hectare GHA. What that means is that either this country of Congo is so fertile and population is very less, and they have needs which can be produced in a very small piece of land, right? And then everywhere in between. And if you want to find India, India is not bad. India is somewhere here. We are not that bad. Okay, our ecological footprint seems to be not that bad. Okay, but then you can clearly see all the developed nations, right? The Europe, Western, North America, they have a higher ecological footprint. Okay, so these are some of the key points. Many Asian and African countries have low ecological impact. Okay, all advanced or developed countries have high ecological footprint, and technological advances in effective usage may actually reduce GHG. So what we are trying to say is that for these cases where the ecological footprint is high, maybe if you can think about a good scientific technological advancement, we can still meet their needs but drawing a much lesser resources. Okay, so that is one of the sustainability goal for people in this region. Okay, is it clear? Any questions here? Yes. This is all per capita. It should be per year, I think. Per year, I think. Yeah. I don't know exactly how they calculate this number. So maybe it's per year. It doesn't matter. It could be a reference anyway, right? It can be per day or per year. We are not talking about absolute number, but relatively speaking, you can see there are few nations having lesser ecological footprint than the other. So that is a message rather than the absolute numbers. Okay, so I can check that and or you can check that and find out. Yeah. All right. Okay, so this is about how we consume natural capital. So let's move on to something called the manufactured capital, which basically means the industrial growth, profit, economics, right? So as you would know, the economic state of a nation typically measured in terms of GDP, right? Gross domestic product, right? So it's a value of all final goods and services provided in a country in 1 year. Okay, so this is also given in terms of GDP per capita. That means per person, how much GDP is available for each country. Again, we have distinguished different continents here. You can clearly see that most of the Scandinavian and Western Europe seem to have a very high GDP, okay, over about hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Okay, this is per year value. And we can see that many countries in Africa have very poor state of health, financial health, about $1,000 per year GDP. Okay, and if you want to find India, India should be somewhere here. Okay, we are roughly about $2,000 plus GDP. Okay, so you can see there is a disparity in the economic state of different countries. Okay, Europe seems to be on this higher side, Asia, Africa seems to be on the. So you can already see some correlation between the previous slide and this slide. Okay, the countries which have higher GDP end up having higher ecological footprint. Countries having lower GDP seem to actually have lesser ecological footprint. Okay, pretty much there is a kind of a correlation, right? And why GDP is important? Well, you know, if you have good GDP, then you can actually invest money in various things. For example, you can pay for the education, higher education, research, healthcare, social service, and work on science and technology. Okay, when you are low, you probably cannot do much of this. Okay, so clearly financial health is important, but it cannot come on its own. It's going to have influence on something else, like I said before, right? Okay, let's go to the third one. This is the human capital, right? About people. Here, there is no, again, you know, very common index here, but here I have taken one such. It's called United Nations defined Human Development Index. Okay, it's some aggregate of various factors. Okay, let us not worry about the definition. Some normalization, some scale is defined, right? So it goes basically from 0 to 100. 0 means you have a kind of a very poor living condition, not a very healthy lifestyle. When you have 100, you are probably talking about a very highly advanced society, access to health, access to education, good lifestyle, pursuit of happiness is possible, etc. Okay. So you say the combination of several welfare related metrics to give ranking from 0 to 100, which includes life expectancy, educational opportunity, employmental opportunity, gender equality, living conditions, sanitary, hygiene, sanitation, public health, so and so. Okay, everything related to human beings. So if you see here, again what we see clearly, the human index is very good for Europe, Western Europe, and North America, and not so good for Africa, right? So you can see a kind of a correlation already, right? So we see that Europe and North America have, Scandinavia have about more than 90 plus HDI, and most of the African countries have less than 60, and that also is related to because of the reason that many of the African countries have less GDP. Okay, when you have less GDP, as I said, you cannot spend on human welfare schemes and various things, so automatically you're going to have lesser index. All right, okay. So as I said before, there is a lot of interdependence of all the three capitals. Okay, I'm trying to show some correlation now. Here we are comparing the GDP versus the people. Okay, that is social security versus wealth, human living condition versus the financial health of the nation. Okay, so one thing you will see is a very nice positive correlation. Okay, the higher the GDP, better is the money people spend on social protections. Okay, you could have actually put HDI here, but instead of HDI, I have put something called social protection, how much money government is willing to pay for individuals of the citizen. Okay, so if you see, there are some dash lines here also, right? So one general trend is, regardless of which continent I'm talking about, there is a positive trend that if GDP increases, social protection also increases. Okay, that's a general statement you can make. But then if you look carefully, you can also see some sort of a grouping of the countries. So here this line here talks about 20% spending of GDP on social security. there are some countries which spend about 20% on the social security. And here you have countries which spend about 2% of GDP, and then anything in between. So all these lines basically talk about 2% GDP, 5%, 10% and 20% GDP. So nations which have spent about 20% GDP are on the higher social security, okay, and they are also on the higher GDP, okay, and nations which actually spend only less amount of GDP for social are mostly populated near low GDP, okay. So that's what I have said here. Europe spends about 20% in social security. Many Asian African countries spend less than 2% in social security. So wealth enables better social care. That's no brainer, that's intuitive. This is another comparison of comparing environment versus wealth, that is comparing natural capital versus the manufactured capital, right. So here we are looking at the ecological footprint that captures the impact of natural capital. On the x-axis we have GDP, which captures the manufactured good or the health of the nation. Here also you can see pretty much a positive correlation. Higher the GDP, higher the footprint. This already I remarked before, I am just reiterating that, okay. You can see a nice correlation. Countries which have higher GDP end up having higher ecological footprint. You can see Qatar is also there. So Qatar is one of the oil rich country which has a high amount of GDP comparable to Western Europe, and by that they also have a highest ecological footprint because of the oil field and other things, right. And then these people here, you see this lower side, all these countries have very poor GDP and hence also poor or less ecological footprint. So we can say high GDP affords good human capital, ecological footprint increases with GDP, okay. So what we are trying to say is that these three capitals are not independent. You cannot optimize each one of them separately. They are all closely connected, okay. That's the whole point we are saying, okay. All the three, natural, manufactured, human capital, these are all interdependent. You cannot change one without affecting others, okay. So here now whatever I just said is nothing to do with this course, okay. It's a general statement. As a citizen you should know all these bigger goals and bigger projects, bigger numbers anyway. So when we make choices in our lives, I wanted to think about these three things, right? How much are we affecting planet, how much are we affecting people, and how much we are affecting wealth, finance, so on, so okay. All of them are kind of interrelated. So now whatever we have discussed so far is a more global picture across nations we compared. Now we are coming to a little bit smaller scale. Let's think about a product, okay. I'm making a product, I'm a company, I'm making a product, okay, or maybe I'm offering a service. Then each of these smaller unit corporates and institutions, they also have to engage in sustainable practices. And how do they engage? They basically try to do certain choices so that they can minimize all these impacts. For example, we want the natural capital to be minimally affected, so we can do something called an environmental life cycle analysis. Whenever we try to think about a product or product development or a process or service, one can actually think about doing an environmental LCA, environmental life cycle analysis, to see what is the effect and what's the consequence and what is it we can do. So far we have not done that. We didn't care. I want plastic bottle, I just made it. I didn't worry about it. But now maybe we should think, okay, should I really make a plastic bottle or should I have some alternative? What is the life cycle of this plastic bottle is going to be? Can I change from this to paper, or using a paper cup is far more ecologically more impactful than a plastic? Those things will come out by doing an environmental LCA, okay. So what we mean by that is we look at how much resource will be consumed, okay. I'll take an example of this bottle, right. When I want to make bottled water, plastic caps, plastic container, labels, printing, inks, and of course water inside, okay. and purification that goes there. So if you look at all this, we want to look at what are the resources that are consumed. The plastic is made from crude oil, right, and various other byproducts. Emissions, when I make it, I would have applied heat, I would have burned something to make energy, I would have burned coal. So how much emission, CO2 emission I am doing in the process. And what is the impact of these processes, material consumption, energy emission on environment, and what's the risk? Okay, can I make a risk assessment of that so that we can report? Okay, it is not common here, but I think soon what we will see is that we will get a carbon dioxide footprint in the label soon. Okay, and then when you think about manufactured capital, here we do this all the time. We calculate how much we need to spend, how much is going to be liability, whether there's a profit or not. Okay, what we the one in the middle is something that we always do for any business. We do costing. Okay, we don't do anything if it's going to incur losses. We will do only if it is a profitable. Okay, so the second aspect is something very natural for all of us. We all do that. Okay, nothing to be done here. Third one is what is called this human and social capital, where just like how we do environmental life cycle analysis, one should also think about doing a social life cycle analysis. Okay, what that means? It means that if I look at this bottle, there are going to be some people involved in making this, and there is going to be a place where they are going to make this. So what is the working condition of people doing that kind of work? So the shelter, what kind of accommodation these people live. What about the transport? Okay, how do I ensure the transportation of the people, the product, and various other things? Protection, working conditions, human right violations or human right conditions, all that should be included in the social LCA. Okay, I do not know how this is actually done, but we have some knowledge of how to do this ELCA, and I think in the part of the course we also will do some LCA of environmental analysis and risk assessment. The social thing is a little bit more complex, and I don't know how people do that, but there is a anticipation that one should take care of all the three LCAs. Okay, the environmental, the financial, and the social. Okay, all the three. Okay, at a product level. And you would have actually heard this again phrase CSR, which is called corporate social responsibility. Okay, this again is a very common practice these days. Okay, again you would have seen this phrase several times. So as a corporate, as an institution, again you have a responsibility of reporting and abiding with several regulations. Okay, for example, you want to keep the economics in mind because people have invested in you. I am talking about as a company, you are a company or a corporate company, okay, and people have invested in you for a profit, for economical reasons. So of course your interest has to be that the investors expectations and anticipation is important. And then of course you have to, as an institution, as a corporate institution, you also have to be legally compliant. Whatever the law of the land, regulations, you want to follow that. Okay, there is no leeway in that. Okay, you have to just follow that, whatever that is. Then there's something called ethical. So ethical is more like moral. Okay, you are supposed to do a good practice. Okay, you have to be fair and just. When you hire people, you don't want to discriminate between men and women, or you don't want to discriminate between disabled versus others, right? So you want to give a fair chance for people, right? And how do you practice that kind of fairness in the business is also something is reported. And discretionary, sometimes people go beyond. Okay, they have made wealth, the corporate company has made wealth, and they want to give it back to the society through several means. They may work on education, they can try to improve working condition of farmers, let's say. Okay, giving back to the society through various philanthropic activities is under discretionary. So as a corporate, if you are going to run a corporate in the future after getting a job, you may have to follow these four things: economical, legal, ethical, and discretionary perspective of a company. Okay, so that you are actually in a good position in your business, right? And finally, there is also something coming up called sustainability reporting. Okay, as I was saying before, CO2 footprint has to be mentioned, few other things have to be mentioned. So here what is expected of, again, corporate companies is to give a number, give an index, give a quantification of various things. For example, you want to give financial results. This is something I already mentioned about as a balance sheet. You have to declare how much income, how much losses, how much liability, so that your investors or the public know about this, right? And then you should also report your market share, what kind of procurement processes you are following, how are you maintaining corruption free, how do you remain exploitation free, and etc. etc. Okay, so all that comes under economic. Then we have environmental reporting. We have to say what materials are we using. Okay, am I using plastic, am I using wood, am I using glasses, am I using mining metals, etc. etc. Okay, what type of materials are we using, how much about the water I am consuming, how much energy I am consuming, what about the emissions, am I complying with, to what extent I am complying with environmental regulations. Okay, so those are the things have to be reporting. And then of course social, what are the labor practices in terms of leave and benefits and perks and other things, human rights, society, product responsibility. When I make a product like this bottle, I'm not making just because it makes me profit, right? And I have to also worry about how I'm going to get this disposed of. Is it going to be biodegradable, or is it going to cause any long-term risk for humans or others? Okay, so product responsibility is also something that one has to report. So all corporate submits an annual report end of the financial year. Okay, they will say, okay, what are the new initiatives, what are the new products launched, what is the market share. So majority of the report will talk about financial status, but that's what the investors are interested in. But we see that there is a new interest in also looking at other aspects, to what extent we are environmentally conscious, in what extent we are socially conscious, in what level we are actually following rules, and etc. Okay, and some companies or some countries already have certain index coming up. There is something called Dow Jones Sustainability World Index that some companies report, and there is something called FTSE for Good Index. These are some of the indices that are coming up to say to what extent you are actually following sustainability practices. Okay, so what this means is, like in financial market, we have a company and then we have a share, and we monitor that to see to what extent this company is making profit or something that is doing well. So similarly, we are going to have this kind of indices, more such indices coming up to say something about how sustainable these companies are in terms of running their businesses. Okay, my bottom line is, financial interest is not the only one anymore to run a corporation. Okay, other factors such as the natural capital, the social and human capital also have to be taken into account. Okay, only then the sustainable development can be achieved. I can actually say a couple of examples how people are actually changing their mindset with regard to the sustainability. This is from my own personal experience. There is a in Europe there is a superstore which sell all kinds of things, mostly clothing and various things, and very cheap. I don't want to take the name of that company, and many people actually, many Europeans don't go and shop there, even though it's very cheap. But many other tourists or people going from other places would just